In medical school, they teach you to first do no harm. What they don't prepare you for is a drunken patient waking up and screaming, "Nigger, what are you doing to me?" As a medical intern, I fought so a 17-year-old black kid could get an experimental heart transplant, only to watch the hospital say no and let him die. Because one of the lead surgeons didn't want to waste a good heart on a kid from the ghetto.
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, MD, and you are tuned into my podcast, where my goal is to spread hope, positivity, and inspiration. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you can find this content to be life-saving and life-changing. Hope this helps. Today, we have a very, very honorable guest, the one and only Dr. Woody Myers, the former Indiana State Health Commissioner and a vocal advocate against racism. Feel free to introduce yourself, tell the people who you are and what you've done.
Thank you very much for this very unique opportunity. I appreciate it. I am Woody Myers. I'm a physician by training. Many years ago, I became a critical care internal medicine specialist. And for a while, I was the associate director of an intensive care unit out in California, but decided relatively early in my career that it wasn't enough just to take orders, to take care of patients in the ICU, that I wanted to do things that would allow me to make the decisions about how the ICU was staffed, how it was run, and all of the inputs that come into running a major institution. And that led me to a whole variety of experiences over the last 30 years that have involved in medicine, business, and politics. And I guess it's very fair to say that I have spent 30, now almost 40 years at the junction of medicine, business, and politics.
Okay. Well, it's very nice to meet you. Thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Major Davis. For the people that don't know, I am currently a sophomore in college, and I started this platform to give people a sense of hope, the people who feel hopeless and like they have no one. Just a reminder that you have someone who cares about you. So, do you feel like the way you grew up shaped you into the man you are today?
Yes and no. I think that both my mom and my dad aspired for me to do good things, if not great things, and they wanted to give me the kind of upbringing, the kind of life that would get me started in the right direction. So yes is the answer with respect to how it shaped the initial part of my career, but I don't think either one of them expected that my career would take off in the directions that it did. And they had certain ideas about where I should be, what I should do, that over time I couldn't accept. The first major disagreement was where I went to college. My father wanted me to go to the University of Chicago, which was relatively close to the city of Indianapolis compared to the other places where I had applied, and almost got his way by bribing me with a car. He said I could use a car if I did that. And I knew that if he did that, that means that I wasn't going to take his suggestion, because he wouldn't have done that unless he didn't want me to go to the other places. I decided to go to California, which is, I think, what he was afraid of. I decided to go to Stanford instead. And so these are not the most major differences that parents and children have, but it was the start of a divergence from what he wanted and what I wanted. And that's what kids do. They take what parents give them and they take it a step further. And so yes is the answer, but no is the answer as well in terms of your question.
Okay. So as far as you can remember, was there anything specific that sparked your interest in medical and public health?
A lot of different things. I'll tell you a couple stories. I think a lot of boys grow up if they're fortunate enough to have a father in the home, they want to grow up and in many respects be like your father. My father was a sergeant in World War II in the Army Air Corps. And in those days, the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, was part of the Army. He would tell me a few stories, but not a lot, about what his life was like as a member of the Army. So I said, well, okay, if he was in the Army, then I wanted to be a Marine, because I thought the Marines were better than the Army. And if he was a sergeant, I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to be a captain. And so one of my early goals was to be a captain in the United States Marine Corps. And I remember that very early on as being something that I aspired to do. I didn't become a captain in the United States Marine Corps. The Vietnam War was going on in those days, and then there was a draft. A lot of young men today don't even know what the draft was. That's where you got a number, and if your number told you whether or not you were going to get drafted, or if it was low, if it was high, then you weren't going to get drafted. I remember my draft number was 238, which was pretty high. So the likelihood that I would get drafted was pretty low, and so I didn't get drafted, and I went ahead on it and went to college instead of going into the service. But those are the kind of experiences that get you started off and that you remember. It was one of the things that, in answer to your question, that I look back on as a pivotal. After I made the decision I wasn't going to go and fight on the front lines, or I couldn't fight on the front lines because I wasn't able to pass the physical, I decided that instead of going to Vietnam and killing the enemy, I would become someone who saved lives instead, and decided that going into medicine was an honorable alternative decision to that. And then another thing happened when I was a young boy. My dad had a lot of junk in the backyard. He was a landscape contractor, so he kept building materials, and he would tear down old buildings and break some of the stuff that he wanted to keep home. And I was a young boy. And what do young boys do when there's junk in the backyard? Well, you jump all on it and you play on it. So I jumped and fell and stepped on a nail. And in those days, stepping on a nail was a very big deal, because you worried about tetanus, which is caused by a bacteria I later learned about in medical school, Clostridia tetani. So what you did is you had to go to the hospital to get the wound cleaned and get some prophylactic attention to it. And I did that. I got in the car, and I know that when we drove to the hospital, we passed the big hospital that was relatively close to our house. And I asked him, why are we, where I thought we were going to the hospital. He didn't answer me. And instead of going to the big hospital, we went to the smaller county hospital. And later I found out that they didn't like people who looked like me going into the big, primarily Caucasian hospital. And I remember also when I went to the smaller county hospital, they put me in the emergency room, and they used to have you soak your foot when you step on a nail in water with Epsom salts in it to try to draw out the toxins. And so the nurse prepared a big pan of water, put the Epsom salts and stirred them up. And I put my foot in, it was ice cold. And I said, it's water. I remember that water was cold. And I remember what she said to me. She said, yeah, it's cold because we ran out of hot. And I said to myself, I don't think they ran out of hot water at the other hospital. I think that's something that's unique to the hospital that you wanted me to go to. You, society, wanted me to go to because of how I looked and how my dad looked. So those were factors that said to myself, number one, medical care is very important. And number two, it's unfair as to how people are treated in this healthcare system. And that made me want to become a change agent within the system, both in terms of learning how to provide medical care and learning how to fix the system in addition.
No, that was a powerful answer. I love that. We know that pursuing medicine is very challenging. So I want to know, how did you stay motivated throughout your journey?
Well, that's a good one too. How did I stay motivated throughout my journey is the question. I think, first of all, you surround yourself with positive people. You don't surround yourself with people that are always trying to tear you down. You try to surround yourself with colleagues, friends, people that want you to succeed. And so you help each other. And both when I was a pre-med student and when I was a medical student, I did that. Not everybody wanted me to succeed. Not everybody wanted anybody who looks like me to succeed. There were people that were rooting for my failure, but the people that I surrounded myself weren't in that group. They were in a very different group, a group that's was very supportive. In fact, many of them are still friends of mine today, many decades later. So that's one of the main things. We worked together to sustain each other. We studied together. We collected old tests and traded them so that we could, try to figure out, if we can answer the old test, maybe we can do better on the new test when that test came out. So we did things like that, study groups and so on. And that helped quite a bit. And then when you had downtime, it helped to have a group of people that you could sort of relax with. And make some positive memories with. And we did that as well. Back in the old days, we used to have parties. I don't know if folks have parties anymore in your generation, but we used to go to each other's houses and play records. Your generation doesn't know what records are. They're these round things they have music on, and you put the record in the record player and you put the lever down and it plays the music, and you have to keep changing the song. But that's what we did. We didn't have playlists. We had records, and so we had parties at each other's houses, and we did some of the things that you all do today. We every now and then we had a cocktail or two. We drank a little bit and enjoyed each other's company. So that's kind of what we did to relax and to keep each other sane, because it's very stressful going to not only do you have to go to pre-med and get good grades and then get good test scores, you have to do the same thing in medical school, and then get good grades and good recommendations so you can get a good internship or a good residency, and then you can get a good fellowship. So the cycle just keeps repeating itself. And all of those cycles are associated with a certain level of stress. And so having a good support system around you is a very important thing to have.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Whenever I feel like I need some motivation, I look back on my family, and those are the people I find my motivation from. I think about how far we came and where we come from whenever I just need some motivation in my system. So that was very powerful that you said that. So would you say it was your purpose to pursue health?
I ask myself that question a lot, even today. It's hard to know what your real purpose is, and it's hard to know when you're done. Am I done? That's why I have never embraced the what I call the R word. People my age are often embracing the R word. That's retire. I've never felt like I should retire. I've always felt like there's way too much left to do to take time, serious time off. Everybody needs a break. Everybody needs a vacation, but you got to get back to work at some point. So I've always felt like I had to keep going, and I still feel that way today.
So looking back at your time in medical school, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
There were just an enormous number of things that you would have never thought of going into what I went into to medicine that ended up being an issue. I'll just give you one example. I was in the emergency room, and I think it was a second year student, and I'm having a great time because when you're a medical student in the emergency room, you learn how to do relatively easy procedures. And one of the procedures you learn how to do is suturing. That's when somebody comes in with a big laceration or cut. You learn how to clean it out, and you learn how to give a little bit of an anesthetic, and then you learn how to sew it up and stop the bleeding. And I was trying to get good at suturing. I still remember how to take the bite of this and then wrap the suture around, pull the suture through, cut the suture. I mean, I could still in my mind do suturing because it was one of those things that you learn early on, and you had to learn how to do it well. So I remember I was in one of the big open wards where there's like 10 or 12 different beds that they could all see each other. They had little paper curtains between the beds if you had to do something that you didn't want everybody else to see. But most of the time, the big open wards, the paper curtains were open. And I had this, I think he was like a 14-year-old Caucasian boy from one of the suburbs close to Boston. It was Charlestown. In those days, the drinking laws were different than they are today. You could drink legally at 18, which meant that people started drinking at 13. And this young boy was pretty inebriated, got in some kind of a fight, and had a big laceration on his scalp. And scalp lacerations bleed quite a bit because there are a lot of blood vessels that are on the scalp. And so It takes a while to get control of the bleeding. And so I'm doing my thing. I'm getting control of the bleeding and I'm suturing him up. But he's kind of stuporous. They got he's still pretty much out of it because he's drunk. And he's breathing okay and his heart rate is okay. He's 14, so he's got plenty of cardiac reserve. But I'm suturing him up, and then he kind of wakes up while I'm suturing him. And he kind of looks up at me, kind of curious as to what I'm doing. And then, in the loudest voice he could possibly imagine, screams to everyone in the room that could hear him, "Nigger, you let go of me and let me out of here." And it's like, I'm his doctor and I'm trying to help him. And he uses the N word. And everybody in this room, there were 20, 30 people in the room, including other patients, froze. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Is this going to be a racial incident of some sort? What are you going to do? And then, of course, there was a part of me. There was like 49% of me wanted to haul off and use my fist for ways other than turning the suture. But 51% of me said, no, it's probably not the best strategy, Dr. Myers. You probably don't want to do that. And so I had to think quickly. And fortunately, I came up with something that I look back on it to this day and thought was a pretty good strategy. I said, okay. And I put my sutures down. I said, tell you what I'm going to do. And I forget the kid's name, but I've got your phone number. I'm going to call your dad and you're going to have your mom go get him out of the bar. Dad was probably in the same bar that the kid was in, and tell him he has to come down right now to the emergency room and pick you up. Because if we're not going to be able to suture your wounds, he has to bring you home. We'll give you a Band-Aid or two, and then you can bleed on your mother's carpet and the bed that you sleep in tonight, and have them deal with all of the complications of this scalp wound. No problem. So I'm going to go call him, and I'll be right back. And the kid immediately realized that if I went and called his dad, and his dad had to leave the bar and come and get him, that he was going to get the beating of his life, and that was far worse than the indignities of being sewn up by a black medical student in the Massachusetts General Hospital emergency room. So he basically gave me no more trouble as I finished up my suturing. And I don't remember exactly, but I may have given him slightly less anesthetic than I would have normally given him. I don't remember for sure if that happened or not, so I don't want to say that happened for sure, but I want to believe that might have happened. And if it did happen, I should be ashamed. But nonetheless, I remember that incident very, very, very well.
Yeah, that's a very...
It's like you're called upon to do something that is unnatural. You're taking care of another human being. You're using scientific skills. You're using things that you've learned at the best medical school, if not the best medical school, one of the best medical schools in the country. And this kid has no idea of all of the things that could happen to him if I didn't sew this laceration up. But at the same time, he is repeating a racist phrase that I'm sure he had heard 1,000 times at home. He learned from a young age. I mean, the people don't come out of the womb racist. They learn racist, and they often learn it best at home. And so I'm dealing with countervailing forces, the forces that say, on the one hand, this is tribe against tribe. And the strongest tribe wins. On the other hand, this is science that we're employing for the benefit of other human beings, and science wins. So it's one of those things that struck me early on in my career, that there had to be a better balance for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a very, very traumatic experience. I couldn't imagine going through that at all. So how did you stay level-headed when you encountered racism? How did you manage to not act impulsive, but to stay calm and continue to do your job?
It's hard to do sometimes, my friend, but you realize that the momentary joy that you might have for acting in a way that's more primitive will cost you dearly in terms of the length and the breadth of your career from that point forward. And you learn to make the instant calculation that this situation can be handled better. Uh, and sometimes you have to eat those primitive feelings that you have for retribution and of angst or hate to do what the higher angels call upon you to do. And it's a challenge. I mean, even today, I still get the feelings that when I see a racist incident on television or I hear about one, the actions that I want to take or that need to be taken. But I have to tell myself, no, that's not my job. My job is, if I'm an emergency room physician, as I was in those days, to do something very different. My job is to stop the bleeding, reduce the pain, and take care of the next patient that's waiting in line. And that's what I had to train myself to do as efficiently and as quickly, with the highest level of quality as possible.
Yeah. Racism is 100% unacceptable. You shouldn't dislike somebody because the color of their skin, that doesn't make them less of a human. So it should not be tolerated at all, especially not in a medical institution. As I was doing some research, I found something very powerful that I wanted to ask you. So could you tell us the story about you fighting to save the 17-year-old?
That was hard. Okay, the internship year is often the hardest year of training for a young physician. You finish medical school, so technically you're a doctor, but you're not a real doctor yet because you're at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. You're having to do a lot of things that the older doctors don't want to do or don't feel like doing. You're taking care of lots of different patients, but you're doing relatively low-level chores and tasks, trying to learn what it's like to do the higher level. But yet, you are a doctor. And one of the things that you do as a young doctor is to present patients to the older doctors to get their view as to your treatment plan. Every patient has a treatment plan of some sort. So I was doing a cardiology rotation during my internship on Ward West 1B at Stanford Medical Center. On this ward, we were taking care of patients that were being evaluated for cardiac transplantation. In those days, Stanford was the only medical school still doing transplantation. Lots of others had tried it and stopped, saying it's too early, can't be done. But Stanford said, no, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep doing it. And we had a patient, I had a patient, he was assigned to me, a young 17-year-old African American male with a disease called idiopathic hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is a disease where the heart muscle grows large, which at first sounds good. You know, it's good to have a big heart, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't, because the larger your heart, the more inefficiently it pumps. And so it can't pump the blood well into the lungs, into the brain, into the places where the blood needs to go. And in those days, if you had this particular disease, the only effective treatment was to put in a new heart, to do a heart transplant. He was being evaluated at Stanford, and as it's turned out, this young boy lived not very far from Stanford, only a couple miles, in a place called East Palo Alto, California, which is basically across the freeway from Palo Alto, California, which is where Stanford's Medical Center is located. And so I did all the preliminary evaluation. We found all of we took all the blood tests that we needed to do, the x-rays and so on. And we found that he was the perfect medical candidate for getting a transplant. And so I presented the case at the rounds, and the senior physician for transplantation was there. Not the surgeon, but the cardiologist. The cardiologist referred the best patients from his perspective to the surgeons, and the surgeons took only those patients to the operating room. And I thought my guy was a slam dunk to get a procedure. I mean, he was young, he was otherwise healthy, he lived close by, he had no complicating diseases, and I thought this is going to be one of the easier presentations. And then after I finished my presentation, the social worker, who was a Caucasian woman, got up and made a different presentation. She said that, yes, Dr. Myers, all the things you said are true, comma, but his mother doesn't speak English very well. By that, she meant she spoke with a heavily Southern African-American kind of an accent. So it's hard for Caucasian people trained in Massachusetts schools or California schools to understand the dialect, and that it was difficult for the communication to be as efficient as they were used to, number one. Number two, she was poorly educated, basically meaning she didn't finish high school. She had to work. And they were very concerned that she wasn't going to be able to bring this kid in for his appointments after the surgery. In other words, that she wasn't going to follow their instructions to bring him in on Tuesday at 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever the appointment was. And it's like, wait a minute. I mean, she got him here to get the evaluation, didn't she? And she came up with a lot of what I would call bogus reasons. Basically, she was saying that this is a procedure that we want to save for the people that we like, and he's not one of them. And so I'm figuring out as this presentation is going on what's happening. And much to my surprise, the senior physician that makes the final decision basically agreed with her and not with me. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, this guy has no medical contraindications for the surgery, and she's giving bogus sociologic reasons. And he's going to say those are enough to keep him from getting the procedure. And afterwards, I said, wait a minute, what just happened? I mean, we kept the patient from getting something he needs to save his life. For what? You know, why did we? I mean, and all of my other interns that I was complaining to knew exactly what had happened. Yet all of them also understood that there were some bigger things at play here, that basically they were trying to optimize their research statistics, so they didn't want any possible glitch to occur. Is she going to be able to recognize exactly how many pills to get him after the procedure, and on and on and on? Is she going to be able to get, I mean, all of these things that were theoretical as opposed to what we had actually in front of us, which was a patient who needed this life-saving procedure. And I remember to this day going into the patient's room. The mother is there. The patient is in the bed. Basically, the patient's lying flat, not almost flat, because he can't move around because he doesn't have any energy because his heart's not beating well enough. And the doctor, whose name I remember and whose face I remember to this day, sat on the bed, put his hand on the patient's hand, looked up at the mother and said, "We're going to treat him medically, not surgically," without explaining what that meant. Because if surgery is your only option to live a normal life, treating you medically means that all we're going to do is give you medication, which we knew which I knew and everybody else knew wasn't going to work to save his life. And the mother looks relieved because she's a normal person. She's afraid of surgery for her son. And the kid's 17. He has not the foggiest idea of really what's going on. And so we basically delude the mother into thinking that he's getting his care, the best care, when in fact he was not. And that case has bothered me from the time that it happened until this very day. When I became health commissioner in Indiana, one of the things that I asked the governor to do was to let me create and run the Organ Transplantation Commission for the state of Indiana. We put a study together making sure that the distribution of organs was fair in the state of Indiana. But remember, to get a heart to transplant, somebody has to donate that heart. And I wanted to make sure that the rules that we were using were rules that gave everybody a chance based upon their medical need, not anything that was bogus. That was one of the incidents, and there were many others over the years that led me to the conclusion, of course, that just like everything else, there's racism in medicine, lots of it, and the difference is that most of it is hidden from the public. One of the things that has happened in society is that these devices, our cell phones, have given us a window into some acts of racism. That's was the first one was Rodney King's beating in Los Angeles County years and years ago, and then all the way up to George Floyd a couple years ago. If it hadn't been for somebody taking the device out and filming it, we would have never known about those incidents. If it hadn't been for the brave camera crews of NBC News and CBS News back in the 60s, I would not have seen Sheriff Jim Clark sick the dogs on women in Mississippi and Alabama, or excuse me, Mississippi, I think it was Mississippi, women who looked like my aunt and my grandmother just because they wanted to register to vote. I mean, sicking dogs on them. to keep them from getting in line to register to vote. The cameras allowed us to see those things, and then we reacted to those things. We had demonstrations, we had meetings, we had all kinds of activities that resulted from witnessing those atrocious acts. But the difference is in medicine, we don't have those kind of cameras in the operating room. We don't have those kind of cameras in the emergency room. We don't have those kind of cameras when the decisions are being made to not treat a patient who should get a treatment in a clinic or in a kind of setting that I described for you a minute or two ago. And I told myself that somebody has to tell that story. And if I'm not going to be able to tell it with a camera, I've got to figure out ways to tell it through other means.
Okay. Which is horrible because we know today racism is still a thing. It still goes on. And I really did not know that that was a problem in the medical industry. So I'm thankful that you gave me some insight on what goes on behind closed doors, because a lot of people may not know what goes on behind closed doors except for the people that are actually there, because
Well,
it's easy
let
to
me
keep
make
a
it clear.
secret.
It's not every day, everybody, all the time. It's not universal by any means. There's some really terrific physicians who go out of their way to make sure that it doesn't happen. But there's some who don't.
Yeah, that's traumatic. That's a very traumatic experience. 17-year-old young male. It could have been me. It could have been a sibling. It could have been a cousin, a brother, someone who looks like us. To see what goes on to people who are African Americans is really scary in today's world, just because we're a different shade of skin. So, given the fact that you had to overcome lots of challenges, what was the most rewarding aspect during this time?
What was the most rewarding? I mean, we had small victories. I mean, I call it small victories. There were some things that that we did that I did that I look back and I'm proud of. I mean, some diagnoses that I made of patients that were helpful to keeping that patient alive, and treatments that we put in and got underway. There were some people that I helped to influence to become physicians. I was very involved in a number of organizations that help young people decide to go into medicine for a career and help them decide to stay in medicine. I've helped a number of people over the decades choose their careers, choose what they were doing in their careers. So I've had a number of positive experiences along those lines, and then I've been in a number of leadership roles. It's hard to know which decision that you made of thousands of decisions in those roles made a difference over time, but you know that some of them did. I was involved when I was health commissioner in Indiana, helping a young Caucasian boy named Ryan White who wanted to go to school but had HIV, and the the people that were responsible for school decisions in his community up in Kokomo, Indiana, didn't want him to go to school because they were afraid. And I tried to explain to them that there was no reason for them to be afraid, and then that led to a number of complications for him and his family, and ultimately the family moved to school districts, and we helped them to get established in a new school district. I was the leader of the health department then, and so his story became an international news story. Ultimately, Elton John and Michael Jackson and Ronald Reagan ultimately became President Reagan became friends with him. And there was a major piece of legislation, the Ryan White Act, that was passed to help people with HIV/AIDS, all because Ryan's courage. And I think that I played a role, as did my team, in helping that to happen in a positive way. Of course, this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. Ryan died in 1991. If he had been born a couple years later, he'd be possibly alive today, because the medication that we now use to treat HIV was right around the corner. He was a little too early to get that medication, and so he passed away before he could be treated adequately. But nonetheless, I think that was one of the more positive things that I contributed to during my time in that role. But in each role, you do different things. I've done a lot of different things over the last about four decades. I got my medical license in 1977, 78, and it's now 2025. You do the math, you can figure out the difference. That's a lot of years. So I've been around for a while, and I participated in just an enormous number of different kinds of activities over those years to try to move the system, move the ball, move the curve, help patients move things in the right direction for people. And it's difficult to just kind of pick one out. Which one, which of all the thousand things you did, which one actually made the most difference? I don't know. Maybe somebody who looks back at what I did 100 years from now, maybe they'll figure it out, because I can't tell you today. I do know that if you keep pushing, you keep trying, you keep giving up your time and your energy, and you keep trying to do the right thing for people, then ultimately you get paid back. And I've got children that none of them are in medicine, but children. I'm very proud of their careers and the choices that they've made, and that if I hadn't done some of the things that I did, that they wouldn't perhaps have had some of the choices that they had. So it pays off in all kinds of different ways, and you never know until you know. So I'm proud of that effort, and proud of the fact that I took risks. And I think of all of the things that are most important to me, if you have to name one attribute, what made the most difference, it's courage. And I like to want to point to courage under fire. I go back to that original story that I told you about being a United States Marine. My goal was to be a Marine and go to Vietnam and lead men into battle. That was the simplicity of it. That was my calling at that time. And so leadership has been a theme that I've dealt with in one way or another now for 40, 50 years. Leadership can be expressed in thousands of different ways. It's making decisions as opposed to sitting on your hands and taking the safe way out. I try to figure out what's not the safe way out. What's the right way out? That's the smart way out. Because sometimes these decisions are not obvious. So you can't just wake up one morning and decide, today I'm going to fight racism. No, it doesn't work that way. You got to figure out, all right, of all the various things I'm involved in, which one, if I work on today, could make the most difference? If I work on it a little bit more and I push it a little bit further, how can that advance the ball down the field? How can that change the world a little bit, such that down the road things will be better? Hard to know. It's very hard to know in advance what that is, but you just keep waking up every morning, put one foot in front of the other, and you try the best you can.
Well, I'm glad you also had some rewarding aspects during this time, because while pursuing your destiny, you come in contact with a lot of suffering and a lot of challenges. So I know that you had many days where you wanted to give up. So I want to ask you, what kept you going?
I'm going to take a bit of issue with your statement. I never really felt like I could give up. There were days when I was a little bit discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
There were days when I was down. There were days when things didn't work as well as they might have worked. There are days when I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't do as much as I could, but I never really have ever felt like I could give up or wanted to give up. I've never had that feeling. Maybe I'll have it one day, but I haven't had that give up feeling at all yet. And I'm happy because I haven't, because I have no right to give up. Let me tell you why. No, and every time I get close to maybe starting to think about that feeling, I keep telling myself my mother. I knew my mother was serious when she would call me by my whole name as opposed to my nickname. My whole name is Woodrow Augustus Myers Jr. And most of the people call me Woody. But when my mother said Woodrow, I knew she was I knew she was serious, and so I hear that voice that says, Woodrow, oh, you're not going to give up. Woodrow, you got more to do. Uh, Woodrow, you gotta pay some more dues here, dude. You didn't get up this morning and have a problem with finding breakfast, did you? No, you ate too many breakfasts. You had too many. You've had dinner every night that you wanted dinner. Nobody starved you. Nobody forced you to get up and pick anybody's cotton today, did they? You didn't have to pick cotton today. And you know what? No, nobody snuck into the slave quarters behind the big house last night and raped your sister or your grandmother or your mother. Nobody did that. And that happened in my family several generations before me. But nobody did that today, did they, Woodrow? So things are better, aren't they? And so I tell myself, look, I did not have it as bad as they did. They suffered in ways that I've never had to suffer in order for me to then move the ball forward so that the next generation can do even more. So I have no right to give up. Give up. Hell no, I can't give up, and I'm not going to. So being discouraged and giving up, those are two completely different things. You can be discouraged. I'm discouraged today because of what's going on in Washington. I see the pernicious Nazi-like activities that are occurring in the name of efficiency in the United States government. I see the fascism. I see the hypocrisy. I see all those things, and a lot of people say, we can't do anything about it. We might as well give up. No, no, no. We just have to get ready for the next fight. We have to fight smarter, better next time around, and we have to get ready for that right now. And there are things that we could do today to help us get ready. So no, I don't believe in giving up, and I'm happy to talk to anybody that's got talent and tell them why they can't believe in it either.
No, I understand. And I love that answer. But it is times when we get discouraged. And I'm so glad that you gave the difference between giving up and being discouraged, because it is times when you feel like there is no other option. It is times where the odds are against you. It is times where things are not working as you would imagine them to work. So I'm glad that you gave us the example. Anybody listening to this, remember that you can't give up. It's okay to be discouraged. It's okay to feel down, but you have to get up the next day, continue to put one foot in front of the other to get to your destination. So, what does hope mean to you?
Let me answer that. Hope means that I should, at my stage of life, invest a few hours into people at your stage of life every time I can, with the goal that I will not see the fruits of my labor. You're going to have a wonderful career doing whatever it is you end up deciding to do. Chances are I'm not going to be around to see a big chunk of that, right? I might get to see the start of it. But I'm gonna bet that if I invest a couple of hours here and there with you, then that investment is going to have a return, a financial return, a societal return, a return in whatever kind of outcome measures you wish to choose. But my investment is going to pay off in some way or another in terms of what I care about, the goals of moving society forward and reducing the impact, the pernicious impact of racism, et cetera. So that gives me hope that my investment is going to pay off. So I choose to do that. So when young people call me up and say things like, Dr. Myers, you don't know me and we've never met before. You have no reason to think about me as anybody, but I would like to, if I would possibly be able to talk to you about whatever it is they want to talk about. If it's schedulable, I will do it, because people did that for me when I came over. I created a few years ago a collage of the people that were important to my career development, people that at various stages of my career. There's about maybe 15 plus or minus People, I found pictures of them on the internet, and I kind of cut them out, put them all on, put their names on it. And I showed it as a slide in one of the talks I gave. These are the people that gave up some of their free time to talk to me. So I need to pay it forward, I guess is the right way to think about it. I need to pay that debt forward. And it gives me hope that if I do that, then there'll be a return for my grandchildren. I have no idea what my grandchildren ultimately are going to end up doing or what contributions they are going to make, but maybe one of them will see this interview one day. Who knows? And maybe they will say to themselves, "Look, if I have my grandchildren call me G Dad. That's my moniker. It's like all the kids today they name all the athletes by their first letter, and it's something. I'm G Dad, so I have all my grandchildren call me that, and maybe they'll look up one day and figure, what did G Dad do? What did he spend his days doing? I think back to my own grandfather, who I barely remember, and I can see him on only like 2 or 3 occasions. That's all I have left in my mind about when he was this age. And he had a remarkable life. He did some remarkable things, but I never got a chance to hear about him. And there is no visual record of, having this kind of conversation. If I could go back in time, I would love to have had this kind of conversation. Well, okay, my grandkids have other things to do today. They got to go to soccer practice. They got to do their homework. We're not going to spend 2 hours having a philosophical discussion. But when they're ready, somewhere on the internet, this discussion, they could press a button and see it. Hopefully, and as a result, maybe it'll inspire them to do something that they think is important. Maybe it'll be a day when they're discouraged and they'll hear G-Dad say from the grave, "Oh, it's okay to be temporarily discouraged, but you will not give up." And so that's what I mean by that. That's how I interpret your question as to what gives me hope.
No, I love that answer. That's a pretty powerful answer. What hope means to me is having a very, very strong belief that things can get better and things will get better, no matter the situation, no matter where you come from, no matter who you are. Just fostering that sense of belief will almost instantaneously make your life tremendously better. Because if you have a strong belief that things can get better, I mean, you start to feel it. If you can believe it, you start to feel it. So to me, you just feel really good, when you believe things can be better than where you are right now.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with that 100%. Yes, sir. You're
Okay,
correct.
so if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would you say?
Trust your gut instincts. It took me a long time to realize I had pretty good gut instincts. And your gut instincts is that voice inside of you saying, "This is not right," or "No, I think we should do this." I don't believe what they're telling me. I mean, I have learned to trust my gut instincts now, but I wish I had learned it faster and earlier. And I wish I had paid more attention early on, because you get all these inputs and you don't know which way to go. Well, you've got this inner voice that's telling you, we don't have all the right information, and some of this could be an emotional decision, but we got to separate the emotion out, the fact we don't have all the facts. What is your gut telling you to do? Those are your gut. I mean, that to me, I would tell my 19-year-old self, 17-year-old self, "Hey, you have good gut instincts, Woodrow. Use them."
Okay, that's powerful. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, I would just say it's okay not to fit in. It's okay to be different. You don't have to be like everybody else. That's what makes you unique. That's what I would
Well,
say.
I would counter that, my friend, and say you have a luxury to be able to have that kind of a statement to your younger self. Why do I say that? Because I had no choice about not fitting in. And what do I mean by that? 2 things. Number one, when I was very young, they advanced me. I started kindergarten when I was like 3 or 4. And they advanced me 2 or 3 years in school. I went to the gifted classes. They don't call them that anymore, but The long story short is I started high school when I was 12. I graduated from high school when I was 16. I graduated from college when I was 19 because I compressed 4 years of college into 3. So I started medical school when I was 19. And so I've always been 2, 3 years younger than everybody else. And especially when you're an adolescent, you don't fit in, because they don't want like a 12-year-olds don't get invited to the cool high school parties. They just don't. And when I got to be 14, I thought, well, I'm 14 now. How come I'm still not getting invited to the cool stuff? Because and that was one thing. Second thing was that I had a major league problem with obesity. And I still have some of that, but I had it much worse when I was younger. There was a point in my younger life when I weighed over 400 pounds, and I was very fortunate to have the intervention of a physician that helped me to lose over 200 pounds. And I kept much of it, but not all of it off. All of that, when you weigh 400 pounds, you don't get invited to as many things as you do if you weigh 200 pounds. And for a whole variety of reasons. Even if you feel like asking certain girls out on a date, they don't say yes as often when you're 400 than you are if you're 200. And so I did not have the luxury of fitting in, even if there were other reasons for me not to fit in. Because when you are visually not in the right grouping, or if you're age-wise not in the right appropriate grouping, then people don't invite you to be a part of the team, of their group, of the clan, whatever you want to call the setting that you're in. And so I had to learn how to survive being a loner outsider without completely dissociating myself from the larger body of people. That was challenging. And there were many times when that was discouraging. You're right. I think your conclusion that it would be better for you to tell your younger self to not worry about it is right. All I'm doing is saying that it's a luxury to be able to have that kind of concern, because visually and from an age standpoint, you do fit in. All right. And so you were automatically excluded. Like there's the recent case of a brother who was an Army sergeant, I think he was, had a stellar record, who just shot up 5 of his comrades at an Army base. I think it was in Texas. And the story now is that they were relentlessly badgering him because he stuttered. People who stutter have very, very strong feelings about how they are treated because of their stutter. They look like, quote, normal people. They're the normal age for that group, but stuttering is one of those kind of differences that causes some people to it triggers the worst in a lot of people in terms of how they treat a fellow human being. And it's a clinical and medical issue, right? I mean, the brain doesn't process auditory and words in the same way as other people. So you have this phenomenon of stuttering. So all I'm saying is that there are many kinds of differences that cause people to not fit in. So you have to question, what is fitting in? What should fitting in mean? Should it mean everyone of a certain age, a certain gender, a certain color, what is fitting in? And that's a discussion that's really worth thinking about, because there are so many kinds of differences between people: language, weight, appearance, intellect. There are a lot of people that don't think, for instance, there should be gifted classes. Why should those with an IQ of greater than X hang out with others who have an IQ of greater than X? Couldn't the people with an IQ less than X benefit from hanging out with the people that are, well, wait a minute. I mean, are we creating this grouping, i.e. a class, on the basis of IQ, or what about other things that are important? It's, one of the reasons that they advanced me when I was young into a different class is that the third grade chairs were too small for me to sit in. And so the fifth grade chairs were bigger. So it was like, well, he'll be more comfortable. He can at least sit down in class when I'm having a struggle. I mean, that's a real thing. If you can't fit in the daggone chair, how are you going to learn? It's all of these various things that impact people that you have to think about as you determine what a group should be. I'm not the expert in this. I'm just suggesting to you that there are a whole slew of things that cause us to have these concerns about differences, and I just listed a couple. So those are all. That's what something your generation should think more about.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay. So before we wrap this up, I like to end my podcast by allowing my guests to speak some words of wisdom to the audience, to the people who feel discouraged, to the people who feel like nothing is working out, to the people who want to give up. What would you say to them to give them a sense of hope?
Well, no matter who you are, where you are, life can be very short, and none of us knows exactly how long we have. You know, all of us have heard the proverbial, you can get struck by lightning walking outside tomorrow when it rains, right? Well, you could get struck down by electricity even if it doesn't rain. Yeah, there's just a ton of ways for us to prematurely, from a statistical standpoint, in one's life or have one's life ended. So you have to live every day to the degree possible, to the fullest, right? So I think that one must have an attitude of, what's the best thing I can do today? How can I get the most out of today? And if you can't have some optimism about what you're going to do today, then maybe there are reasons that you should find help to get you to that point. Because depression is real. Suicidal feelings can be, for some people, very real. And today, the good news is that we have all kinds of ways that we didn't have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago to recognize and treat the organic mental illnesses that can lead to depression and suicide. But not everybody that's discouraged is clinically depressed or suicidal. I think that setting realistic goals and surrounding yourself by people, a good group of people that want you to achieve those goals, that's key. And if the group of friends that you have around you today isn't that group, then you got to go somewhere else. People are afraid to leave wherever it is that they came up. I was very surprised when I was commissioner of health in New York City. There were a lot of people who lived in the various New York City boroughs who really never left their own borough. People who said, I'm from Queens. Why do I want to go to the Bronx? Or people in Harlem, I don't want to go downtown. I live uptown. It's like, what? Oh, I mean, people the United States is one of the countries where a relatively low number of people have a passport because I think some of them are afraid to leave the United States. They don't know. It's not just a money issue. It's like fear. It's discomfort. It's the unwillingness to try something new to get a better result. The definitions of insanity, you've heard this before, is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. If you do the same thing over and over again, you're not getting the result you want, then it's time to do something else. It's time to go somewhere else. It's time to be somewhere else and not be afraid to do that. Like I said, life is short. So you got to make decisions that will optimize the chances that you are to have the kind of successful life that's available to you if you want it. And for each of us, defining what a successful life is different. I'm not trying to say that a successful life for you is the same as it is for me. Woody Myers and Major Davis are two different people. But there are some possible things that we ought to think about that could bring us together. I mean, like, you and I both feel that there ought to be optimism and hope, and that there are lessons to learn and lessons to share. And you've decided to create a podcast to be able to help other people to see that. And I've decided to participate in your podcast because I too believe that. So we found a way to intersect. We found a way to overlap our interests together. Well, I think that's what people that are feeling discouraged should do. Find people that have similar interests. Find people, whether or not they live in the same borough that you live in. It's okay to go from Staten Island to the Bronx. It's okay to get on the train to go. It's okay for you to go from Atlanta to New Orleans, or New Orleans to Houston, or Houston to Albuquerque, or Albuquerque to Phoenix, or Phoenix to LA, or LA to San Francisco. It's okay. My dad didn't want me to go to California because he didn't understand California. He was afraid for me to go to California. He thought he understood Chicago better than he understood California, and he was probably right. So he was less afraid of me going to Chicago. I wasn't afraid of Chicago or California, so I was indifferent. So I decided to go where I thought would be better for me. And so I think that's the same thing you got to do, is to take good risks. So let me conclude your excellent question answered by saying you got to be willing to take good risks. Like John Lewis said, you have to be willing to get into good trouble. Woody Myers says you had to be willing to take good risks to get into good trouble. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that is. And my message to the viewers is, don't give up on yourself. You can't afford to. You can't afford to give up. Why not keep going and see what the end result is? Keep fighting a good fight and continue to hope that things can get better, and they will get better. Just doing that simple deed right there, hoping that things can get better, will almost instantaneously shape your perspective in a positive way. Continue to stay positive and view the challenges as lessons. View the failures as lessons. It's not a failure unless you quit and you give up. Continue to learn from these experiences and continue to grow. So, hope this video helps. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing content. I hope this video helps. Peace.